Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're excited to have Nivolo participate during Webinar Week as one of our on-demand webinars, which is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will be able to access a link that will take you to a quick survey. You will be able to download your certificate once you've submitted that survey. Before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to remind everyone that the first of 3 HTM mixers for 2020 will take place next month, August 19th and 20th, at the Omni Interlochen Hotel in Denver, Colorado. This event is supported by the Colorado Association of Biomedical Equipment Technicians. Join us for 2 days of networking, continuing education, and vendor engagement in a slightly modified, less crowded, and safer environment. Visit htmmixer.com for more information and to register for this event. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank Nivolo. Nivolo helps companies better manage enterprise assets using modern mobile real-time reporting and industry-leading cloud-based platform. Visit nivolo.com for more information. Our presenter today is Heidi Horn, VP Global Enablement for Healthcare. She's joined by Dustin Smith, Senior Solution Consultant, and Kyle Holetz, Advisory Solution Consultant. Heidi, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nivolo and Technation's Enabling the Connected Hospital, How to Solve Coordination Between HTM, IT, Facilities, and Clinical Care Departments. We're going to start with some brief introductions, and I'll start with myself. My name is Heidi Horn. I'm the Vice President of Global Enablement for Healthcare at Nivolo. Prior to coming to Nivolo a year ago, I actually was the Vice President of Healthcare Technology Management for a large health system, and did that for several years, many years actually. And so I'm the subject matter expert for healthcare and healthcare technology management here at Nivolo. Dustin?
I'm Dustin Smith. I'm a Senior Solution Consultant with Nivolo. Prior to this life, I was with Intermountain Healthcare for almost 14 years, in which I finished my career there as the Director of Central Support with HTM.
Hey everybody, my name is Kyle Holetz. I lead our healthcare solution consulting team here at Nivolo. A little background on myself. I haven't been as in industry as Heidi and Dustin per se, but can have a long background with both ServiceNow, CMMS system startups, and been working at Nivolo in our healthcare practice for about the last 2 years now. I'm looking forward to working with you through this presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with the agenda today. What we'll be talking about is connecting healthcare technology management, IT, facilities, and the support teams in our connected hospital platform. We'll go from there and talk a little bit about business use cases. So we'll give you some actual use case scenarios to talk about how things are done currently and what you could look forward to through a Nivolo connected hospital experience. We'll also talk about the benefits of having a connected hospital and what that looks like through improved patient care, compliance, and cost savings. And finally, we're going to end up with a demonstration of the Nivolo connected hospital platform. So to set the stage here a little bit, wanted to talk to you about the key teams supporting the connected hospital. As we all know, there are literally dozens of departments that are providing support to patient care. It's not just clinicians, doctors, nurses, so on and so forth, that are providing that support that each hospital needs to be exceptional. You have the Healthcare Technology Management Department that provides clinical equipment maintenance and management for literally thousands of clinical devices across all sorts of different departments. You have facilities management that provides maintenance management and support for the facilities, the utilities, repairs, and so on. You have information technology that supports your networks, your computer hardware, servers, clinical and business applications, obviously, again, across the entire continuum of each hospital. You also have the people who are in charge of capital equipment planning and finance, who obviously are responsible for not only buying new clinical equipment, new hospitals, new utilities, and new computer equipment and all of that. So they have obviously a broad swatch of responsibility looking at all the different things within the hospitals themselves. And then of course you have the clinical care departments that aren't necessarily providing direct patient care, but have a huge support responsibility with pharmacy, nutrition services, and linens. Next slide, please. To add complexity to all of this, each one of these departments obviously is using their own different applications and processes to support and provide the support to the hospitals. So if you look at facilities in HTM, for example, they each have their own computerized maintenance management systems. Typically, they're different from each other. And those systems are looking or are monitoring and tracking the inventory of the clinical devices and the facilities assets. They're providing the maintenance management history, the work orders. There's looking at regulatory compliance reporting and performance monitoring. Again, these are very insular type of systems that are not looking at anything other than their own key responsibilities in those particular departments. You also have the IT service management systems that are looking at IT-related incident tracking, incidents and project resolution workflows, and asset management in some cases. Again, those are looking at specific things to the IT department, but if it comes to anything that might have overlaps to the other departments, they do not have any visibility into that. There's also the enterprise resource planning system, the ERP, which is obviously responsible for purchasing, tracking expenses, supply and financial tracking of not only capital, but also non-capital expenses across the entire enterprise, across the entire hospital as well as health system. And then, of course, cybersecurity monitoring, OT security, which monitors in real time alerts for network connected device to manage security threats. Those are also done in its own independent system that is not looking at the other systems and how those two all interface with each other. So as I mentioned, all of these systems are independent of each other. There's no interface. They're not again, sharing information. But what if that could be different? What if you could look at the collective data of all of these systems, of all of these departments that have such an integral support requirement across a connected hospital, and you could get that data in one place, and you could analyze that data and provide better business decisions, provide more efficient operations, could better coordinate among all these teams that have such an integral part and have many overlapping parts in the hospital. So Dustin's going to take it from here and talk about some examples of what that might look like.
Thanks, Heidi. And thank you for all that background and describing some of the key players and components in this. So what are some of the business use cases for the connected hospital? Let's go ahead and step right into one. So our first use case really revolves around medical device cybersecurity. Without a connected workplace solution, you're going to start to see some of those silos and also where we don't always have the appropriate information. So you may have a security event that comes in from either an OT monitoring solution, or maybe it comes from your network security and monitoring system, and you find that something is happening with a particular device. Well, all of that information is simply going to stay with IT, and that's regardless of what the asset is. And unfortunately, due to the technologies they may be using, they may be stuck looking at this strictly from an IP or a MAC address perspective, and they don't always understand the context behind the device. And that can be a huge issue, because if you don't know what a device is, you don't necessarily know the appropriate way to respond and really where the limitations can be as far as that response. You don't want to knock over a device that is actually helping assist a patient in terms of maintaining their health. And if you can't partake in certain activities, how are you ultimately going to fix this? And so that's one of the areas where we believe we can actually create a solution. So Now, as we start to step through a similar diagram, you're going to notice that there's a lot here that is different than ultimately the problem. And so now you have that same vulnerability that's coming in, but then we're going to go through a contextual engine. And this is really our operational technology cybersecurity solution. And that's going to go through, and instead of simply having an IP or a MAC address, suddenly you have the passive monitoring solution passing that information over to the CMMS, and that information can actually be passed back. Now you have an understanding of what this particular device is and who's going to be able to respond to that. And also, because of some of that information that you've been able to see in the CMMS, you may even find that there may not need to be a response. So as you go through this, and in this particular case, it does appear that there needs to be a response, we're going to actually dispatch to the two different groups. We can push a portion of that response to our IT service group, and they'll be able to perform their part of it. And at the same time, you can also push a response to HTM to either validate that a change was put in place or to actually physically respond to the device and potentially do some patching on site. And by being able to pass that torch back and forth, suddenly things are accomplished much faster and you're able to remediate that risk. In our second example, we're going to talk through some imaging corrective maintenance. So if you have an imaging device that goes down, oftentimes that's simply going to be passed to HTM, and they're going to do the best they can to respond. But unfortunately, due to the complexities of imaging, it may not always be HTM. Are you having issues with the chiller if it's, for instance, a CT scanner? Are you having some issues with a workstation? Is there something going on with PACS? How do you ultimately go through and dispatch that information in a coordinated effort? And so with that, let's talk through how this would be resolved within a connected workplace. So you have that same issue that comes through. A device seems to be working improperly. Maybe it's not communicating with the network. Well, now that we have an understanding of what workstations it's related to and what PAC server it may be hitting, we start to have an understanding of how and who we would actually dispatch that work to. So we can start immediately from a single work order, actually assigning tasks out to the specific groups to double check that. If we needed to, we could put a task on the work order that asks that facilities comes out and actually checks on the chiller. We could even put a task out there so that we can have someone come check on the PAC server. And then lastly, because it's all under the same healthcare technology management work order, once those other areas have been addressed, you can have an engineer on site to validate that the equipment is back up and running and that they can ensure that it is prepared for that next patient. Our last example, as we go through this, we start to realize that by having a connected workplace and by being able to gather that data from all of these different groups and this additional context, suddenly we have a much better opportunity to really get capital replacement information. In the past, your cost structures that are housed within a device in your CMMS, they're strictly going to be related to the HTM group. Well, now you start to have a better understanding of some of the ins and outs and the other parties that really do have some ancillary responsibility for that equipment as well. And you can pull that into your capital equipment replacement planning. So not only do you have better cost information, but you also have these other groups that you can reach back to get a better understanding of how they relate as well. And with that, we can start ultimately talking through some of the benefits that really apply to a connected workplace. First and foremost, you're really going to experience improved uptime for clinical devices, and that's going to be facilitated just through better communication. Now you have the capability to simply push a task under a work order to these different groups. You're also going to have more reports available in real time. And again, that comes down to a more succinct platform for communications. This is also going to yield itself some cost savings opportunities. And also, you're going to ultimately end up with better revenue as well, as that applies to improved uptime and better responses. Faster remediation for equipment issues, especially when it comes to vulnerabilities and threats, instead of having to sit there and wait for somebody to find a better understanding and a better context of equipment that may be experiencing a threat or a vulnerability, you suddenly have a clearer picture of who else should be assigned to really remediate that risk. Next, we have improved cybersecurity. Being able, again, to remediate that risk that much faster. And furthermore, we also have an opportunity, anything that is discovered in your cybersecurity tool, your passive scanning tool, we can pass that information over to our OT cybersecurity solution and get those into our CMMS as quickly as possible to not only make sure that that equipment is safe, but also to ensure that you are in compliance in having an accurate inventory. And then lastly, being able to have process integration with different systems, especially those such as your enterprise resource planning system. If you have ITSM, we can also do real-time location services, and then even looking into how you're tracking your time and potential time card solutions. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kyle so that he can actually talk us through what the connected workplace looks like within Nuvolo.
Great job, guys. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Dustin. I will do my best here to finish up strong. So what we're going to walk through now is really, you know, Heidi and Dustin have framed both the use cases, the issues, right, and the benefits and the value of a potential, you know, modern CMMS switch of what we can do with a connected workplace application. So what I'm going to do now is really step through these three use cases with real world examples within our product. I'm going to stay very focused on these three things, but we'll also try and add some additional benefits in certain areas like capital equipment replacement reporting and look at some connected workplace reporting as a whole. So what I'm going to do is just end my slideshow here, and we will switch gears into the app. So the first thing that we wanted to look at, or the first use case we wanted to cover, is around cybersecurity. So the first thing I want to do, and Dustin did a great job of explaining, you know, how can we use the information that we already know to better remediate issues, right? Whether it be faster remediation or just better visibility as a whole. So one of the things I like to point out within the tool, right, is if I pull up an asset record, right? So for example, right here, we have a Cigna record. One of the nice things about this is you can create these dependency maps. And this isn't just available on the asset, right? This is available on the work order. So when a technician comes to this MRI in this case to fix some sort of issue that might be coming from, you know, the end user, they immediately know what's the server that IT runs, right? That this MRI machine is communicating with, possibly, you know, pushing images to an offsite rad tech who's giving notes back to the doctor, right? What's the facility's HVAC machine that's supporting the temperature controlled room? Right? All of these issues are visible, and this gives us the ability to very quickly tell our colleagues the exact piece of equipment that we assume is having an issue, right? So I wanted to point that out quickly because it's very important as we're talking about cybersecurity. But what we have here is our cybersecurity dashboard. So what I want to go through here is really two things: the cybersecurity overview, talk a little bit about a SOC engineer and how they can work, And then lastly, dive into a security event or security incident as a whole and how we can share that among different groups. So looking at the OT cybersecurity management dashboard, this is really broken up into sort of 3 core modalities. Device security events at the top, arguably being the most important, right? So if I want to query down to see all of my critical events, I can do so. True, meaning active exploit events. Security source, many organizations run multiple IoT monitoring vendors, right? So we can see where our certain events could be coming from. You could have certain monitoring vendors working on different levels of your network, so on and so forth. Looking down at the critical events, right, we have a very quick list of the exact events that have been deemed as critical, and we need to make sure we always have our eyes on. Scrolling down, looking at device vulnerabilities, right? So not so much an exploit event, but a known issue, whether it be coming from the FDA, the National Vulnerability Database import that we can handle, or just the manufacturer as a whole. Right, so we can start seeing, well, which of these vulnerabilities are actually affecting us, right, as many of them are not correlated or not applicable to any inventory, but also who are my manufacturers that are opening me up to the most risk, right? We might have multiple manufacturers of infusion pumps. Well, which ones do the best job at hardening their equipment out of the box, right, when we receive it, so we don't have to do extra exercises on that front? And then lastly, what type of equipment are these vulnerabilities sitting in? You know, having so many in infusion pumps makes sense, generally a very high volume device. Scrolling down then, just getting an overview of all the vulnerabilities that are affecting our equipment, right? Relatively straightforward. And then lastly, looking at unknown discovery events. So this is new devices that we do not know, as Dustin mentioned, having those IPs, those MACs, those serial numbers. That's generally how a system like Nuvolo or a CMMS system is tying your asset to the asset in the IoT monitoring vendor's system. And so when we look at this, anytime we find one that's new, right, it gives us great insight into a couple things. When are these taking place? At which site? So here you can see our site 1000, site 3600. Maybe we brought in a whole bunch of equipment to test in a lab before we made a major purchase and unknowingly opened ourselves up to or brought a whole bunch of unknown discovered equipment as we're leasing it or renting it, and it might not be represented in our inventory here in a particular month. Or on the inverse of that, which of my departments isn't following organizational protocol, right? So in the case of I'm the CISO, I'm going on some visits and I need to make sure I'm speaking to the individuals who are opening us up to the most risk. Right? So if I scroll back down, just going to refresh the dashboard there, we can start to see, well, in our intensive care unit in January, they brought in 10 unknown devices. This is really good insight into who is following organizational policy and who needs to, who is opening the organization up to risk. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the SOC engineer. Right, what we're starting to see in the industry is a lot of hybrid clinical engineers starting to find themselves in organizations, right? These are people that are generally clinical tech backgrounds or clinical engineers or, of various trades, but also have strong networking or IT or cybersecurity backgrounds. These are those individuals that we're generally seeing working with a lot of this data and these tools. Additionally, this could be used by a group of individuals, right? So when we're speaking to the connected workplace, a lot of these tasks, this data, these dashboards, this can be shared amongst different teams, right? Most organizations we work with, they have a SOC and they have SOC engineers that are sitting there and constantly monitoring, but that doesn't mean the clinical tech shouldn't be looking at the same data, right? They might be able to perform different actions, but it's all about visibility. So when we're looking at my SOC engineer dashboard here, I can see quick information like, well, what are all of our new events for me to digest? What are we currently working on remediating? And how many outstanding critical events do we have? And then if we scroll down of where we want to look at potentially, real business sort of decisions that we need to make, remediation decisions, that's where these two reports start to come in, right? I can start to see by device, which of my devices has the most security events across my organization. Right, so you can see this is looking at asset type, but I can also change this to look at, well, what manufacturers, which models are opening me up to the most risk? So we can start to get powerful insight into those things. And of course, all of these dashboards are actionable. So if I need to click into that piece of the pie, right, I can do so. Additionally, looking at if you're a large organization, have multiple customers across different sites, right? You can see how these stack up by site, and of course, trends of unknown equipment, right? So looking at it as across all of my different sites, where are we seeing stack ups of unknown devices hitting the network? Additionally, something that we're constantly helping our customers with is just improving cyber health, right? So one of the things that we've started to do is provide reports like this one here that are showing devices, and in this case, these are unknown because they haven't been onboarded as their new, newly discovered equipment. They haven't been assigned an asset tag yet. However, you'll notice the MAC address IP is missing in most of them. Looks like, we got some OSs and, who they came from here, what site or customer. But in this case, right, what we can use this data for is, well, once these are tagged pieces of equipment, and I'm going and doing my PM rounds and doing corrective maintenance work orders against these devices, I now know how I can improve my inventory, right? So while I'm hands-on on that equipment, I might as well update some of this critical information, like the MAC address that is absolutely necessary to tie this asset to the record and metagate, right? Dustin, Heidi, will I switch dashboards here? I'll ask if you guys have any other points here so far.
I did not. I think you covered it. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great.
All right. So what we're going to look at now, I'm going to go into a security event, and we're really going to dive into, how we want to break these up amongst different teams. So I had one specifically picked for this. Let me pull it up. There it is. And so in this case, this is an alert, a security event, right? An active exploit event that came in from Metagate. It's been prioritized as, a low priority risk. One of the nice things about this is in this case, it hasn't been assigned yet. So this is the security event that the clinical team is generally, going to receive, and they can decide how they want to triage it from there, right? Maybe that hybrid tech individual needs to work with the manufacturer to get a certified patch. Maybe security, the SOC had already received this and they actually created the ticket, right? So this process is highly both flexible, but also dependent on the organization's operations, right? Of where does it start? So in this case, right, I could assign this to, my clinical engineering group or any various groups, a particular assigned to individual. And we also have the queue record, which I think is important to note because what this shows us, the queue of our OT cybersecurity offering is all the data, right? It's all the noise that's coming into the system. Well, we don't act on all of the noise, right? Well, the queue, in the case that we've acted on it, this gives us that cradle to grave remediation process. We can see the instant that this record hit Nuvolo to the moment the work order goes out and is ultimately closed out, right? So we get that full life cycle of this threat. So if we look at some more of this data here, we can say in this case, it came from Metagate. We can see all the CVEs. It looks like this one's undefined actually, but we can see, the device count of where they saw this, and we get a good amount of information coming right from Metagate that's populated here. You can see when the event was detected and when the event was last updated as well. Additionally, what we've done with the OT offering is we haven't segmented between clinical or facilities or EVS devices, really any of them, because it's all a potential, a potential victim of an attack, right? So one of the nice things about this is it's going to look at all devices, right? Not just clinical equipment. You'll see facilities in the case that facilities equipment, for example, is running the same software firmware as one of your IntelliViews, right? We would see facilities equipment here in our affected assets list no differently than we see these 3 clinical devices. Additionally, 3 work orders have went out. So these are work orders to the clinical engineering team, right? The HTM team. Maybe they went out and took the first look. What did we need to do? Maybe we just power the device down for now until we can get a proper patch or get our security incident or security response team to come in and do, a more fully fleshed remediation. Additionally, another thing that takes place during this process is a vulnerability record is created. So in this case, if there's multiple vulnerabilities, if multiple scanning systems potentially found the same vulnerability, what you'll notice here is this one's prefixed like with something like a Metagate. This can be pushed out into your overarching SecOps console, but additionally, it's tracked within the Nuvolo cybersecurity module just for that historical and audit purposes to show, hey, this vulnerability affected us at a point in time. Lastly, and really to hit home on the connected workplace example, you have a security incident that could have been created, right? And if you remember from when I got into this form, there's a chance, dependent on organizational process, maybe this security incident came first before the Nuvolo security event took place, where we're sending it out to a clinical tech, right? Both of these things that are very flexible. Customers we have doing it really both ways. But what is important about this security incident is that it is what the security operations and those SecOps analysts are used to seeing, right? It's within the tool that they work with every single day. Additionally, one of the nice things about this is a configuration item has been identified. Well, not many people in our HTM world know what a CI means. We don't track things by CI, but they do, right? So what's important about this is to see, well, this actually isn't a CI, it's a very specific medical device, right? Coming from a very specific make, model, manufacturer, so on and so forth. So that this SecOps team can take this security incident with the full contextual information that this is a patient-facing medical device, right? It's not a server, it's not a router, it's not a switch. So you can start to see all the information that they are going to work from. The description is the same, right? They have that same information. There's no loss of communication in this process, right? We're removing that very error-rich human process of emails and phone calls and things like that to be system-driven. You can see all the activities that have taken place, and then down below you can see that there's a configuration item that's been affected by this attack, and there's also an affected user. This could have been the person who reported the problem, or maybe Dustin was the individual who was using the device while it shut down from some sort of exploit. So with that is the first use case I wanted to go through. So the second use case we're going to walk through here, and that Dustin went through in the slide deck, is the case of an imaging device going down, more particularly an MRI machine. So what you're seeing on my screen now is a service portal, right? So this is that end user portal where you would have all of your nurse managers, right? Department heads, those individuals they're making things like capital requests that want to come in and see reports of the devices that they own so they can make budgeting decisions, right? Things like that. This portal is really a multifaceted tool that really can be used to bring in all of your various departments into one hub where they can see the information they care about without having to reach out to you, right? To have someone build a report and send it out to them, just being one example. So in the case that I want to create a corrective maintenance work order, right? I'm in my portal here. I'm in really the role of like a department head, a nurse manager, something like that. I can see all the work orders I've created up until this point and various other information that could be taking place at my health system. So in the case I need to request something, I can simply click that request something button. And what you'll notice here in our connected workplace, all of our different catalogs live in one place, right? So clinical catalog is right alongside facilities catalog, is right alongside your lab if you have one. And of course your IT service catalog, which is somewhere in here, a little different, technical catalog, excuse me. So when we're looking at this, the idea is, we don't want to send users to 3 different portals to request things, right? So in the case that I want to request a clinical device or report a clinical device issue, I can click on this, and this is completely configurable by customer. Additionally, I get all that information of the individual who submitted the problem, right? So Kyle is recorded against this work order. I have his cell phone, his email, all of those things. If I don't know the asset tag, right, I can also switch this to something like a location to then be updated by the technician once they arrive. So in this case, I'm just going to put in one of my assets here. Excuse me. And this is our MRI asset. What you'll notice is a couple things. Once I populate the asset in here, I get some additional information, but I also get any other open or active work orders on the device. Because there's a chance, in the case of like patient monitors and you have people walking by them all day, we could be submitting duplicates, right? The same 3 people might have noticed the same issue. What we're trying to do with this is offer visibility to those end users that is telling them, hey, is this the problem that you are experiencing, right? And if not, we can still create a work order. So in this case, I'm just gonna say the device is down device for the sake of time, and I can submit this work order. What you'll notice now is you get a nice form where the end user, right, this nurse manager, department head, they can physically communicate back and forth with the technician. So if I, been waiting a couple days for this and I need to, ask what's taking them so long, I can show you how we can use that in a moment. So now if we switch gears to the technician experience, right, what we'll notice is I have my technician dashboard here. I won't spend too much time here. This is meant to be that central hub for the work that I both have due and I'm doing, and of course the hours that I've worked. So if I just go into all my open shop work here, we can see that work order I just created sitting at the top of my queue, and we're going to go in there and start triaging and working this work order. So a couple things you'll notice, right? Top section of the form is relatively basic. Your asset, your corrective maintenance, who reported it, what's the room or location the device is in, and it looks like this one was automatically assigned to me. Maybe I'm the lead imaging tech, right? Before an escalation takes place if I don't respond. Additionally, I can see this device is under contract. So right away, maybe I don't need to do anything on this, right? It might be under some sort of full service MSA in which I can scroll down to the bottom of the work order and check exactly that. So I can see here in this case, it looks like parts and labor are both 100% covered. One of the other nice things about this is once we field this work order, right, all of our checklists, our lockout, tagout procedures, they're all included, right? So I can click on my pre-checklist here and know what do I need to do before I send anyone else in to work on this device in this case. If I scroll to the bottom, this is where we're going to get into the shared work, right? So what you'll notice here is we have a series of related information at the bottom. We talked about contract coverage. I can see upcoming PMs, any other work order that's ever been done, right? Knowledge-based articles, so on and so forth. But particular to this example, clinical work order tasks. So if I'm the tech, I show up to this device. Maybe there's nothing wrong with the MRI whatsoever, but the operating console, that is the computer, is blacked out, right? So what I can do is come in, I can create a clinical work order task, assign this to my IT services, and say, computer console is blacked out or something along those lines. And I can submit this. I can put procedures in here that I might think they need to do, so on and so forth, right? One of the nice things about this now is the clinical tech is acting as the quarterback. We can build logic even into the system to say, hey, you can't close this work order out until these tasks have been completed. So additionally, to explore a second use case in this example, well, maybe it's a chiller issue, right? So as a part of this process, I also might as well make a chiller check or something of the sort. I can assign this to my facilities group. And the benefit of this is these tasks, right, are going to go directly to this group's queue. So this will be a work order that they can field and they can go and assign out, no differently than any other work order or task that they get. So that's really the second use case that I wanted to talk through. Dustin, Heidi, anything to add on this one?
I think you have it covered. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
So the third and final use case we're going to get into is really around, the specific example is capital equipment replacements and reporting. I want to talk a little bit, expand that just a hair in the demo, but we'll have a focus on that, of course. Where I want to start is simple reporting, right? So when we're pulling this, in towards getting good, capital planning, budgeting, warranty-based replacement data, a lot of this, we don't even need a report for necessarily, which is a big benefit of the tool. Any technician is able to come in here and run quick queries or reports from a list view of equipment, right? So for example, if I wanted to say, hey, I have, my departments reaching out, they need to know all the devices that are either their warranty is expiring on this year, and we'll even throw an additional characteristic in there and say, or the end of life date is on this year, right? So we can capture both in one sort of query, run this report. I can see I have 271 devices that fit this characteristic. If I want to send this out to my departments, I simply can group it by department, and then I can start quantifying the data. So if I look at, for example, let's just pick one here, general surgery. I have a list of 21 devices that are either ending on their warranty or are being end of life. I can see their acquisition costs here as well. So if I wanted to even come in and run a quick calculation, I could say, well, I need to let them know what's a sort of estimated number based on the last time we bought this equipment, I can go in and I can get that data. List view calculations here, sum this data up to get a total replacement value of a very particular department of equipment that is fitting very particular characteristics. To move on to a different aspect here, and then of course I forgot to mention, you can export those lists, right? Send them around, schedule them to go out at certain points, all of those types of things. So now we're going to jump into very specific reports and dashboards that can be shared amongst, various groups of an organization. So the first one I want to jump into is the capital planning dashboard. The purpose of this is really, once again, where are my outliers? Where are my sort of problem children, if you will, right? So right off the bat, the first report that we see here is what are my devices with the highest cost of service ratio in my particular departments. And we can, of course, set a threshold in this, but all of this leads into that repair versus replace analysis, right? Scrolling down, just seeing the acquisition cost total of my equipment, my service contract cost, all of this can be quantified by site, by department. But we like to try and keep these examples, of course, a little bit broader and simpler. So in this case, right, I can also drill down into this portion of the pie and see exactly what makes that up. Additionally, I can see things like condition assessments. So how many devices do I have of various makes models that are in a worn or needs to be replaced, something that I care about, right? I can change this report to look at things like asset type. So show me, which of my asset types. I have a number of sterilizers here that need to be replaced. I can, of course, click into that and get nice sums. So I can then say, okay, well, here are my two very specific assets. I know exactly where they're located. And I have a total cost of ownership and an acquisition cost here totaled up for me to make great purchasing decisions, but also give good and budgetary numbers with a little backing behind them, right? And then lastly, well, by manufacturer, what's our acquisition cost in our devices that their COSR is exceeding 100%, right? So our sort of problem children, if you will, that we need to look at potentially changing our maintenance plan for. And then, of course, a summary down here at the bottom. The next report we'll talk about is the financial overview. So the financial overview is meant to be a little broader in nature. And it also looks at things like contracts, which are very important, as many of our customers are very contract heavy. So one of the things we do in the tool, right, and once again, this data can either come from other departments. If there's an enterprise-wide contract management tool, right, we can use pieces of it within Nivolo, again, leading towards that connected workplace example where all these different groups can push data in or receive data from the CMMS, right? So looking at contract costs and our ROI. So every time work is being done on a contract covered asset, what's our ROI at the end of that year, at the end of that term? So when we go in and have negotiations with these manufacturers or these OEMs, right, we have real ammunition to tell them, hey, we're going to spend $700,000 on our $1 million imaging contract because I can show you every single cost from your field service reports that you charge to my organization. Condition assessment we already talked about. Repair versus replace is an interesting report where we're looking at devices that have exceeded a high cost of service ratio and their total cost of ownership is twice the acquisition cost. So how much money do we have sitting in various models in terms of their acquisition costs that are in that quote unquote replaceable characteristic? Scrolling down, where's my money going, right? Where's my parts spent? So here we can see of various manufacturers, how much money are we spending on parts with them? Additionally, leading right from that example, what are our most expensive models of equipment, right? So we can see here our Cigna device and various other modalities of equipment, and which of them is our most expensive to maintain. For our larger customers, this is fantastic information for standardization initiatives, right? Many customers, of course, have probably 10 to 20 different models of various pieces of equipment, all of which perform differently in your specific environment. So we can use this data when you're buying 500 new infusion pumps or 1,000 new beds to look at, well, which ones perform the best here at my facility, right? And then scrolling down, projected end of life. So looking at by owning department, right? Again, how much money does the pharmacy department, should they look to spend, next year in 2021, it looks like in February, right? So once again, all great for budgetary analysis. We can click down into this piece of the pie and feed that information over to our departments. Additionally, if we want to do this by site, we can. Right, so if I look at site by site, my site 3600, January 1 of 2021, it looks like I have about $140,000 worth of end-of-life replacements. And lastly, work order itemized costs, right? So again, where's my money going? Where are my costs coming from? So we can get insight into outliers like this one right here. Why did the radiology department at my site H100 spend $75,000, right? I can drill down into this and see exactly what was taking place. Well, it looks like it was a major parts purchase and there was a little bit of labor, right? So we can drill down into that, see what part was purchased. Looks like it was a number of parts in this case, but I think you get the idea. The last thing I want to show that's leading towards our connected workplace example is our connected workplace environment of care. So this is really a form-fitting function for certain organizations where you might roll up to like an AVP of the EOC, or your VP is over both clinical and facilities, right? Traditionally, these individuals are really, hamstringed, if you will, by having to move between 3 to 4 different systems to get the key metrics that they need in just seeing what work is taking place at my organization now, right? So if we look at this, what's nice about this connected workplace, and this is just simply an abbreviation for that, is this is looking at everything: facilities, clinical, lab, EVS. Everyone that is using the Nuvolo product and sitting on the platform can be seen here effectively. So we can get a very good, quick insight into where our problems might be, right? So if we scroll down, you'll notice a number of different problem cause analysis, right? We have this broken up into PMs or scheduled, planned maintenance or scheduled maintenance, unscheduled, then of course other. So if we break this down, we can see, problem causes, and these one you can see looks like it's from a facilities, work order. These ones are clinical, right? You can see that by the prefix there. We likely have some lab in here. But the benefit is, again, one-stop shop for all of that data. Then you can see unscheduled work by site, right? So where are our various work orders? What states are our various work orders sitting in across our sites? So in this case, we have a number of work orders here that look like they don't actually have a site. That's a problem. We can go in and make sure that the asset data is proper. Scrolling down, how are we doing on our hazard alert and recall completion, right, across our various sites? And then you have a nice printout down below to see your percentages. And then, of course, EOC, most important factor is PM compliance, right? So how are we doing in our PM compliance month by month in a trending fashion in our printout below? So with that wraps up the part of the presentation that walks us through all 3 use cases. And what I will do here is finish up the deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed those use cases and found them insightful, if nothing else. If there's any questions about them, feel free to reach out to Heidi, Dustin, myself, really anyone at Nuvolo. But what we're driving here is that connected hospital environment, right? So many people, as Heidi and Dustin mentioned, are working together, and the landscape of healthcare is really changing, and it's requiring us to work together. We can't really any longer work within our silos as things become more network connected, and our sterilizers are connected to the boiler, right? And all of these things are incredibly important to share this work, right? To not only collaborate, but also to coordinate operations, to send reports to the people that need them most in real time. And more than anything else, to improve on an evolutionary basis. These tools, these data points, they give you that sort of foundation to know where you can improve realistically and target those improvements. Thank you guys for the time. Dustin, Heidi, I'll stop and ask if you guys have any closing comments. And other than that, hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Thank you, Heidi, Dustin, and Kyle. Great presentation, guys. Just a quick reminder for our attendees today: to obtain your certificate for 1 CE credit from the ACI, please remember to click the link located below the webinar title to complete today's survey. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Be sure to visit webinarwednesday.live for a calendar of upcoming webinars. We hope to see you back soon.